Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and welcome to another substance tutorial. This time we are going to go over how to export our assets so that we can bake a normal map. In the previous tutorials, what we've done is actually build a normal map using the substance tools, and you guys can watch those videos below when we did the barrel. And in this video tutorial, I wanted to show you how you can bake your own normals. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you need is a low poly object. So this is my low poly barrel, and this is my high poly barrel. So as you can see, it's got some extra details, such as where the metallic stands would be. I even added a hole in here, but if I press the number 1 on my keyboard, you'll see that the little hole here doesn't really do anything. I'm going to go to Mesh Smooth, and now my object is extra smooth. It still looks a little polygonal, so if you want to, just go to Divisions and change this to 2 to make it extra high. So yes, this is much higher than what we originally had, but we're going to be able to take this information from this high poly model and get a normal map to create something that's low poly and make it look like it's high poly. All right, so the first thing you need to make sure is that these models are on top of one another. Now, lucky for me, I duplicated, moved it, everything had frozen transformations, so when I moved the barrel, it was relatively easy to just put it back into 0. So again, make sure that you always freeze your transformations. Second thing, make sure that you delete the history. I'm going to click on this here, which deletes the history. So I have my high poly geo, so make sure that you label it so you know the difference. So this is called my high barrel, and this is my low barrel. All right, make sure they're on top of one another. Zero it out. And I do need to export these separately. So I am going to go to File, Export Selection, and OBJ is just fine. I'm going to go into my assets, and you can find anywhere to put them, but I'm going to put it in my assets, put my OBJs here. And the one I have selected is my high poly. So this is going to be my high poly barrel. Export. Grab the low one and do the same thing. File, Export Selection. This one's going to be called I'm going to select it just and then erase this. Low poly barrel. Export. And now we're ready for substance. All right, I'm going to close this. Let's go to File, New. I'm going to choose PBR Metallic Roughness is fine. I'm going to click on Select and then find my barrel. Here's my OBJ, and the one I'm going to bring in is my low poly barrel because that's the original mesh. That's the one where I want all the textures to end up in. So I'm going to grab my low poly mesh. I go ahead and 1024 is fine, and then click OK. Here is my fancy barrel. Here is my fancy UV maps. So over here to the right, we have texture set settings. Let's scroll down and go to Bake Mesh Maps. Choose a big map, so usually 2048 is good. I personally like to go into my ambient occlusion and say ignore backface always. And I probably recommend you guys to increase your secondary rays just because it makes for a better map. So again, secondary rays for thickness, I'm just going to go ahead and increase that, and all the rest looks good. So let's go back to the comment tab, and over here we can choose that we want to use a high definition mesh. So I'm going to click on this little guy right here that looks like a piece of paper, and I'm going to grab the high poly mesh. And that is basically it. When you're ready, go ahead and click on Bake Selected Texture. It's going to do its thing. And we get some very interesting results. So as you can see, it did a fairly good job trying to get the strips, but it had a complicated problem trying to get this area here. What we could do is mess around a little bit more with these options. So if one of them, what we can do is kind of increase the max frontal distance. Just by a little bit. And again, this might be trial and error. So you can already tell that the results are actually significantly better. All right, so that's looking, whoops, click OK. So that's looking a lot better. Now, the interior here, it's not looking that hot, but at least the exterior looks correctly. Let's go back in here, and what we can do is increase the max frontal and also increase the max rear distance, and let's take a look at that. Again, it's okay to just rebake your textures. And I can already tell that the inside of this occlusion of this barrel is looking a lot nicer. So now we have a nice, clean bake. Now, one of the things that you may be wondering is, wait a minute, these lines are really sticking out here. This is basically a normal map, so it will never be able to stick out unless I use a displacement map. But in general, when I look at the front, this actually looks relatively good and clean. All right, so let's export this map. Let's go to File, Export Textures, and I do want a PNG. This is the place where I can save it. So I personally like to save it in my source images. I already have a substance folder, but I'm gonna go ahead and call this my normal map. So just so that I can keep things separated, I'll select that. All right, now that we have the location, let's go ahead and go to Initial Shading Group. Over here, I can change the size to 2048, so it'll give me a nice higher resolution texture. PNGs are fine with me. I am going to get rid of emissive. I'm going to keep height. I'm going to keep normal, get rid of metallic, roughness, and base. So again, there's a video tutorial on how to do the color, the roughness, and the metallic. But in this scenario, I'm just showing you guys how to use normal maps. So I'm just going to stick to these two. When you're ready, go ahead and click export. And you can see that it says exported successfully. So let's take a look. All right. So as you can see, not much of a height map. So if you want to, you can just go ahead and delete that. But here is the normal map. All right, let's plug it into Maya. So I'm going to scoot this to the side. I'm going to select this. Let's go ahead and assign a new material. I'm going to choose an Arnold AI standard surface. I might as well be smart and just make sure that you call it something that you'll remember what the shader is, which is barrel shader. And where we're going to find this normal map is under geometry. So instead of using a bump map, we're going to be using a normal map. It's still going to be using the same connection. So under geometry, bump mapping, click on this little output, and we're going to choose a file. Now, right off the bat, it takes us to the bump 2D node. Go ahead and change this to tangent space normals. We're not using a black and white image. We're actually using something that has RGB color. Another thing we need to also open is Arnold. It needs to flip the R or the G, and I always forget which one. So I'm going to leave them active for now, and then I'll show you the effects. So click on here, which is the bump value. Let's go to the folder. Here's my normal, and here is my normal map. And right off the bat, you can see that it's looking like it's got more geometry than originally. And that's the magic about normal maps, is that even though this is considered low poly compared to this, especially compared to this one, you can get a lot of really amazing detail. Now, we're getting some weird shadowing, and there's a couple of things we need to change to make sure that Arnold can read this correctly. Going back to the barrel shader, I'm going to click on my bump map. And we end up here at the file. And one of the things we need to change is the color space. So change that to raw, and you can already see the effect. The depth in here is significantly higher than the depth in here. But again, if this barrel is from afar, then you might actually not even be able to tell the difference. And again, look at the polygon difference. It's pretty significant. All right, let's go back into our barrel shader. Let's go back into our bump map. And I'm going to click on this little button right here, which will take me back into the bump 2D node. And we want to flip the R. Now, let me show you why we do this. I'm going to create a floor. I'm going to go to Arnold Lights, Physical Sky, and let's render. All right, so this is what it looks like so far. And I took a snapshot. So we're going to flip the R. So I turned that off. Going to let it render. And you can see how the shadowing is changing based on the flipped R. Sometimes, though, we want to turn off the flip G as well. I've seen that as well. So I'm going to take a snapshot of that so we can compare. So you can see that by turning off the G, suddenly things look a little bit different. So instead of looking like these two, it now looks like this. So I'm keeping the flip G. But you can see that by flipping the R, you can get some different results. So this is without flipping the R, which is red channel. And this is with the flip R turned off, which is this appearance. And that is how you can create a normal map using Substance Painter. You export the OBJs, you can bake it in Substance Painter and bring it back in. This is really great, especially if you integrate ZBrush, because ZBrush will give you millions of polygons, and it's perfect for baking normals using ZBrush, high poly models, and of course any type of Maya high poly models. Let me go in and increase the roughness here so it looks a little bit more interesting. And let me just kind of position it a little bit better so we can kind of tell the difference. And that's how you can create a normal map using a high poly object and baking it in Substance Painter and then bringing that normal map into Maya. So hopefully you found that helpful. Let me know by leaving a comment below. You can download this model in academicphoenixplus.com, so feel free to download it for free and follow along. Also, if you have the time, go ahead and sign up for my newsletter so you can find out what's new in Academic Phoenix and myself. So again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and click the little bell so you don't miss any other tutorials. So keep creating, and I will see you next time.